This is Modern Gaming Culture. This series will attempt to highlight the phenomenon of PC, console, and mobile gaming and bring to light all of its phenomenal aspects. Let's take a dive together into the world of modern gaming and take apart its structure. Now, here's your host, Rotimi Osagi. Alright, this is Modern Gaming Culture. This is episode 33, episode 4 of deck profiles for G Block. So Scarlet Violet to Senate Heroes. Senate Heroes just came out a few days ago. It's not going to be legal for another couple weeks, so it's up to Phantasmal Flames. So it's Scarlet Violet base set to Phantasmal Flames. This episode is going to be about Volcanion EX. I said I was going to do Gardevoir, Mega Gardevoir EX. Doing Volcanion EX. Gardevoir is really good. It's a really good deck. And so I know, it's something where, I've played a lot of Gardevoir tabletop, a lot of different styles. And so I'm very familiar with the deck. And so honestly, with results and just with honestly the community doesn't deserve a Gardevoir deck profile from me, to be quite frank. Considering I'm definitely just, the authority on Gardevoir. And so it's something where it's like, you know, it's just ridiculous to propose that I would make a Gardevoir deck profile, right? Consider you guys pretty much ran Gardevoir into the ground. If anybody's listening, again, congratulations that you made this far, right? But, we're not going to make Gardevoir deck profile. So we're going to do Volcanion. So, it's no mystery that, people who play Pokemon, people who collect cards, are ballers, right? These are people who aspire to amass large amounts of wealth through, their wits, right? And so, despite, the community being very contained, right? I often, harp about how, um, again, like participating in the game arena versus actually observing it is a lot different, right? And so, but also I don't give enough credit to people because who can generally gauge kind of the type of people who play and collect, even while not being part. So, definitely people deserve credit, but of course, right, we have a job to do. And so it's a lot different than, sort of trying to provide a critique, right, for the sake of, fitting in or whatever, right? So, um, you know, you have a lot of these guys and they're just pretty much playing just for the sake of basically testing their luck. And they'll put a large amount of money because they pretty much have more money than they know what to do with. And they are willing to basically risk it all just for a little bit of fame and fortune, right? Which is absolutely outrageous. And we've never seen anything like it in human history, right? And so, this is something where we really need to reel it in. And so, it's really a travesty that, this deck is going to pretty much go without any play percentage, right? So many decks have been going off like this for the last few years, since I would say D Block. So that's when cards like Training Court rotated, etc. And so, it's just pretty unfortunate that, another deck like this is gonna go and just, not get played, right? So I've covered this sort of archetype in, my game design philosophy at series for the Pokemon trading card game, the Expose TCG, right? And so I've done a pretty good coverage of sort of what Pokemon's trying to do here, right? So it's not going to be something that I'm necessarily going to sort of revisit here, right? So this is Volcanion Mike Mortar. So got printed in Journey Together. So it's been around since rotation, right? Journey Together was the first rotation step. This card was good since then, right? You know, you got cards like Pikachu EX, right? That can't get knocked out by one hit. And you had a lot of math that could get fixed with this, right? Where you couldn't necessarily get the math other ways, right? And so this deck has been good since it's come out, right? And they gave it its partner, Magmortar, right? Sort of like an Easter egg, right? And it's gonna take a hit in rotation because TM Evolution is going to rotate, and so it's really good right now, right? This is like Regidrago levels of strength, right? I know I would argue Regidrago wasn't even that good of a deck. It kind of just the stars aligned with it. But yeah, because the deck is just very hard to play because you have to play it very quickly. But again, when everyone's playing it, basically that whole skill ceiling basically just becomes completely diminished, right? Because the issue with Pokemon, right, as an aside, is that you know gameplay does not affect the overall result of the game as much, right? You know, you'll find people who will try to really make a name for themselves, and you'll find that they'll start to play really well, right, when their stakes are very high for them, in the sense that they'll start to play quicker, right? But the thing is that speed of play doesn't really affect anything when it comes to gameplay. Gameplay has to do with a lot more than just showing up and playing, right? When it comes to the Pokemon trading card game, right? As opposed to something like League of Legends, for example. And so it's a lot higher of a skill ceiling when it comes to actually showing up and playing. That's the issue, right? That when we come to really wrestling with the Pokemon community, um, we have to really come to terms, right, from a mathematical standpoint, that our gameplay is not necessarily going to determine our results as much as our actual deck list, just because of how they set the format up. And most likely, it's not going to change because basically there's nothing competing with Pokemon, and so as a result, there's nothing for the Pokemon community to do, particularly in order to basically change that. And they're not going to ban because there's no bans needed, right? Lysandre's trump card is an oversight. Recess Stamp is an oversight. Monkey Door is not an oversight by any stretch of the imagination. Voodoo is not an oversight by any stretch of imagination. Maybe Eerie is. This card is really strong, right? 0-6, right? This card is really strong, right? And so these cards are strong, right? Monkey Door is not. You need to attach a dark energy, and it has to be your energy attachment for the turn, right? Badoo is a 30 HP Pokemon in a format with, Dusclops, right? In a format with Maractus, right? In a format with, Rocky Helmet, right? In a format with Volcanion, right? And so it's not something where, right? So, I know there's just complete and just total chatterboxes going around saying that there need to be bans, and there really doesn't, right? And so, keep on chattering all you like, you're never gonna get banned, and it's only gonna get worse, right? And so, that's what we're working on, right? So, Volcanion has gotten a lot better now. I think this is kind of where it's gonna plateau. But the thing about this type of deck is that it's not necessarily gonna plateau, because as long as it has very strong pieces, right, to really set up that sort of patience board state, right, it'll always be strong, right? So this is a very streamlined Volcanion list, but the thing with Volcanion is that you can make it very stretched out, right? So these lists, when they started introducing them in Scarlet and Violet, they had like Koraidon and stuff like that. And the deck was incredibly slow, right? But it was also just, their first archetypes. So it seemed like, the deck was just really underpowered, but you couldn't really put out a really powerful deck with other powerful decks. It would just create a power vacuum. So Koraidon was definitely weak, right? But it was definitely good either way, because again, gameplay will affect, the game state a lot more, right, than actual deck lists, right? And so I went through a period where I was playing a lot of Koraidon. I was playing a lot of funny Koraidon lists. I was playing them everywhere, and I was having a really good time, and I enjoyed it. And it's so ironic because Koraidon was a definitely underpowered deck, but I actually got my best results playing like Koraidon lists during that period. So that's pretty funny. And so, well, the thing with Volcanion is just infinitely weaker than Koraidon, right? Koraidon had a 220 attack with no costs, right? It could charge up itself, right? Had 230 HP. It was a fighting type, 2 retreat costs, yeah, everything going for it, right? So many combo pieces. It was just a very aggressive card. Volcanion is a lot more patient than Koraidon. And so Volcanion is definitely just weaker than Koraidon by leaps and bounds. And so you know, I don't necessarily think that Volcanion is going to surely shake up the format in any way, shape, or form, right? Whereas, you know, Koraidon, again, with me, I got a lot of success with Koraidon, so, you know, I can pat myself in the back for that, right? But yeah, so this list, you know, it doesn't really do Volcanion justice in terms of how much impact Volcanion can have on the format, right? It's pretty much, you know, kind of bread and butter cards, right? And so it's like, you know, this is nice, right? You can play cards like, you know, Mega Camera Up EX. And for 1 energy, you can attack for 240 plus the burn, it's 260. And then you have rolls, right? Like Vol Mag Mortar, and it's 290. And so it's like, you know, this deck is nice, right? And then if they KO it, you could like attack and then attach on Mela and then go Night Stretcher. You can swing Volcanion. It's a really nice deck, right? But as opposed to the Koraidon list, which had a lot of really cool cards, right? That I've covered. Um, you know, this list, for example, plays 4 research, 4 Iono, right? The list is very boring, right? And so, you know, again, this list doesn't really do Volcanion justice, but Volcanion is definitely a very, very powerful archetype. So, you know, this is a list, right? And I think I play 8 fire and then 4 jet energies, right? And so, um, yeah, I've covered this extensively, right, with the Koraidon deck profile. So I'm not going to, you know, labor it again. I think this is going to be sort of where I'm going to cut it off for this deck profile too. So it's been gonna just close it for the former part of this episode, right? Um, and yeah, if you really want to get more in depth with this sort of archetype, you check it out. The expose TCG. I think it's episode. It might be episode 2. Of the Crowdon episode. Might be episode 2. So you can go check that out. I believe it's on TikTok. It's on YouTube. It's on Rumble too. And so yeah. So the modern game culture, that profiles. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you.